Welcome to KPN Report. I'm your host, Maureen Aylward. Our topic, Citizen Roundtable. And I have at the table with me Peter Dolan, andAria McElhenny, and Jason Grow. Welcome to KPN Report.
Thank you.
All right, let's get right to it. Aria, let's start with you. Your topic is aging infrastructure in the schools. And what do you want to bring to the table?
Well, this is a topic that's been on my mind a lot lately because I am on a committee for a new building for East Gloucester School. And it's a committee that's made up of people from, the government and parents and people from the community. And we're all working together to oversee a process to potentially have a new school built in our district. And so I've just learned a lot by doing that and seen a lot that, I have my oldest already went through East Gloucester and I have a daughter still there, and I love the school. And but a lot of things have become apparent to me that I didn't even really know in understanding why a new school is needed and understanding why school facilities are so important to education and to helping kids learn and helping teachers teach at the best of their capacity. So it's been really eye-opening to me, and this process is going to be a public process that this whole project of potentially building a new school that will eventually be left to the community to decide on if it moves forward. And I think that some people in the community are resistant to new schools, as we've all said that change is hard always. And but I think that it's somewhat can be like a divisive issue sometimes, whether or not we should put forth the money as a city to invest in our school facilities. To me, in my opinion, it's of utmost importance, and for a lot of reasons. And one is, go ahead.
I was going to ask you, I want to jump in and just say, what are those eye-opening elements that you found? And what's making you think so much about this?
Yeah, well, not all of us are completely familiar with the day-to-day workings within a school and the way school is taught now and the way that learning takes place. Kids are often broken into small groups. Kids are needing to see specialists and they're needing to work with certain interventions. So schools need a lot of different spaces within a school to make those things take place, to make learning happen in the way that it needs to happen. And our school, East Gloucester, was built in the late 1940s, not in an environment or in an educational system that taught the way that things are taught now, and so the facility just is not up to standard for what our kids need. One example.
Haven't we had issues where, I remember a little while back, I think the high school had to close because the roof was leaking?
Yes.
Have we been having that kind of thing happen in the elementary schools too?
It's not just the elementary schools. It's infrastructure across the board. All schools are always struggling with this, especially older schools.
Absolutely.
But now there's the opportunity for East Gloucester and Veterans Memorial to merge together.
Potentially combine. And to have a new school built for two populations of kids at once. Some of the specific things that happen within the school are kids who need small group learning or need to work with a specialist. There's no space for that, so it happens in the hallway in the school, which actually is against fire code, and so the fire inspector doesn't want that to happen in the school, so there's nowhere for them to go, and there's no confidentiality for those kids who are working with counselors or intervention specialists. Another, thing very basic is the internet service and the technology infrastructure
the wiring
in schools that were built in the late 40s.
Right.
It doesn't work.
It didn't exist.
What teachers need to do. Yeah. So there's people are doing the best they can and putting in wires where they should be. But in East Gloucester, I saw where the internet where the modem or the router, the internet stuff is, and it's in the dark corner of a basement that has a creek running through it, actually. It's just not up to snuff.
Right. And is there a planning process that towns or cities are supposed to go through to take care of aging infrastructure? And now what we're looking at is, we've got West Parish, brand new school. That seems to be working out well. What are and Jason and Peter, just jump in here. What are some of the issues around resistance to
Money.
having a new school? Money.
Money. Big,
We
big
just
issue.
built. We just built a new
We just
school.
built West Parish, right? Is
Yeah.
the
Do we really need
Gloucester
something
citizens?
so grand?
Yeah. Is this necessary right now to have all these elementary schools in Gloucester? New elementary
If you
schools?
don't upgrade your infrastructure, it's just going to continue to decline. It's not even a question of just maintaining things. We've come into an era where we consumerize a lot of things about our schools and about our government. Students are no longer students; they're consumers. We have very competitive districts to the north and to the south of us who are draining students away from us. And if we're not going to invest in our educational infrastructure and create schools that are going to maintain students, are going to draw families with student-age kids into the community, to develop jobs and to develop economic development, you're going to find that we're going to continue to age out, that schools are going to continue to degrade. People are going to then look at those schools and say, why would I send my kid here when I can go to this nice new school over here? Manchester has just put together a 2.5 override that they passed with Essex pretty phenomenally. Again, I mean, the communities that are willing to invest in their school buildings are seeing students go to those schools. You know, Rockport and Manchester are drawing a lot of students away from Gloucester. That's costing us money. So if we don't invest money into the school district in terms of building schools that are appropriate for the educational challenges that we have, we're going to find those students leaving.
Well, what about that argument on, well, we've just built that new West Parish school. Why do we need to do it so quickly again? Is the data showing that there's a deficiency in learning?
I think.
I mean, there's this facility that's difficult to learn in, but is there a specific data looking at the deficiency of children who are learning in those schools, that they're not getting the best education they could be? Is there a difference between students who are getting educated at West Parish now and this?
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Good question. My guess is it hasn't been around long enough in order for data like that to be gathered. But I'm sure if you did a study over time, you would find good evidence. I think mostly we're talking about day-to-day reality for teachers and for students. And I think if you ask any teacher in one of these aging schools, they could give you a long list of reasons why their classroom isn't working for them anymore.
Right. I mean, it sounds as though if you're saying that we're at a point where what they're doing in the school, what's necessary to educate the students, is starting to create fire code violations, that the building's just not up to doing the job, that we've reached a kind of a critical point.
And they are physically just in dire circumstances.
They do. They are. I mean, you just drive by them and you can see that they're.
And if you're a young family that's saying,
issues.
"Where do I want to send my kid to school?"
Right.
You know, it's not that we have to create the shiny bauble out there to do that, but we have to be realistic and know that there are opportunities for people to take their kids out of our district, and we should be working very hard to not only keep those people here, but draw the ones who've left back. Because
it seems like we're not talking about creating deluxe facilities. We're talking about facilities that do the job, functional facilities versus facilities that are breaking down to where they can't even do the job.
We're trying to do 21st century learning in barely 20th century buildings.
Right, these schools were built in the 40s.
You wouldn't do this. You wouldn't do this with any other, industry or service. You wouldn't have a hospital that provided the same services that they did in 1940 as your primary hospital. You wouldn't stand for that.
Right, with patients in the hallway.
I also wanted to ask a question of the panel about social issues between the merging of veterans and East Gloucester, because there does seem to be some issues there.
Can I back up for a second?
Sure.
I don't think that decision hasn't been made yet, has it?
Exactly.
Whether or not it's going to be merged.
This is still in the exploratory phase of whether there would be two schools or one.
Or merging.
But both school buildings are nearing.
And so that's why they're talking about that.
They were built at a very.
They were built almost at the same time.
Almost at the same time. They both have all of the same facility needs. East Gloucester happens to be the one that was selected by the MSBA, the Massachusetts School Building Association, for funding to have a new school built. But they both need it equally. So the idea is that this could save the city money.
So veterans got the idea of the two merging started to get. I guess just fuel to see if that would happen to to move those children into a newer facility? Is that how that all
Yes.
came together?
So a merging of the schools, which again hasn't been decided on yet, but if it were to happen, it would get more kids into a new school much more quickly than
Right.
building 2 new schools. That will take years and years and years and cost the city a lot more money.
You're also talking about bang
So-
for buck, because
Exactly,
the
yeah.
school populations are going down. The East Gloucester of today is not what it was 25 years ago.
Right.
Right. And so Jason, we can move on to your topic, which is school choice.
Right.
So
But they're
both similar.
hand in
Related.
hand.
Yeah, they go
move
hand in hand.
because
Yeah.
people are making decisions. Again, they're consumerizing the idea of where they educate their kids. Unfortunately, I don't necessarily think they're making the best choice in terms of that, because oftentimes those decisions are not being made with a full understanding of the great opportunities and the programs and the things that are available in this district. People see old infrastructure. They see the middle school, and they say, "Oh, I would never send my kid to O'Malley." Well, my kids went through O'Malley. They had an amazing experience at O'Malley, and they've gone to the high school, and they're likewise doing very well with programs that are available to them that are not available in neighboring school districts. And I think a lot of this has to do with perception. A lot of it has to do with, and I think they're doing a lot better in terms of trying to build up the understanding of the great things that are happening in the district. But there is a lot of ingrained kind of resistance to what used to be. And so people, look at what was happening 25, 30 years ago and say, well, my kids aren't going to go there. That was terrible back then.
So
But
they're
it's
carrying
exacerbated
these old,
by the crumbling infrastructure.
Right, but when you drive in front of O'Malley, you don't see a great inviting school district. When you go in, that's when you see it.
Right.
But
you don't see
the-
what's going on as an innovation school, the sorts of
Right.
things
You
that
don't
are
see the
happening
product
there.
of what's happening.
You see
with
the
the
product of
students.
1970s
Right.
architecture.
Right.
It's
You've
the-
got cutting edge education inside, and
An age
in a
Amazing.
brutalist
Yeah.
architecture.
outside the architecture is
Really.
not inviting, and you've got plus a history that some people have that's
But I will take innovative, awesome, terrific programs inside the school over a pretty exterior any day of the week, because
Sure.
that's what we've got going on there.
Sure.
Unfortunately, people need to get past the
Which
superficiality
first
of what we're seeing.
impressions really
They're
matter.
huge.
Yeah,
They
I
can
mean,
be
I think
huge.
the facilities perpetuate the misconceptions about our district or the misunderstanding.
Yeah, like how?
Well, I think if as you were saying, a young new family is looking at schools and talking to their cousin about what it was like when she went to middle school there and has never actually had a child in the school district, they're likely to listen to their cousin and also say like, oh, and also, the bathrooms are kind of outdated and, I noticed the ceiling tile fell down. I don't want my kid in that school. So, but they're not looking at the curriculum or the wonderful teaching that's taking place necessarily.
And it
They're
seems like
basing it-
Gloucester is just exploding in opportunity. And the high school has the new biotech facilities. They've got robotics.
Robotics. They've got the Endicott collaboration. They've got
Yeah.
there is no perfect school.
Right.
Okay, Gloucester's not a perfect school. I will always tell people that we have had our own issues with things going through the school district. Would I choose differently? I don't think I would, because my kids have had, not only have they had amazingly responsive teachers, they've had a diverse group of friends and peers to deal with. They've had opportunities in terms of the programs that they've been able to take, the AP courses. Those are all very rich offerings, and in some places, in some ways, they're richer than our neighboring communities. But oftentimes that gets a little bit overlooked. People kind of shy away from the Gloucester, and they want something they perceive as safer or they perceive as newer, maybe in Manchester. But I would argue that they're not better. That we're spending an awful lot of money watching people go out of the district. Over $2 million a year now.
Well, someplace like Rockport, they need the students to come in. It's important that they have school choice, and it is a smaller district. They do have different programs that excel at Rockport, and it's an important piece of making sure that Rockport schools are still moving
Yeah, but
forward.
Rockport's got to be
in this-
careful. If 25% of their student body is coming from Gloucester, that's a problem for them. I mean, I would love to see those students come back into Gloucester, because I think that they're missing an opportunity that is available to them in their own district. And one of the issues I have with school choice and the problems that I have with it is not just the financial aspect of it, where people go out of the district and they take resources with them.
And it's problematic because the resources don't really, you can't just you take a few students out and people say, oh, well, then you don't have to educate those students.
Yeah.
But if you take 2 students out of a class, you still have to have the teacher, you have
Cost
to have
doesn't
the
change.
school.
Yeah.
No,
The
yeah.
cost
There-
doesn't
there,
change.
are, there are fixed costs
Certainly.
that you
Right.
have,
Yes.
and if the students come from all over the place, if some are taken from here, some are taken from there, you're not going to reduce the number of classrooms you need or the number of teachers that you need.
Right.
So it's
Very
a little,
important.
it's a, I think a common misconception that, the
false
money just
economy.
goes with the child and the costs
That's right.
associated with
That's right.
education decrease by exactly the amount of money that went to the other district.
No.
It really doesn't work that way.
Yeah, and this also doesn't cover, in the new districts, say, from their opting out, school choicing into Rockport, Rockport still has a lot more costs rather than just the payment from Gloucester. That doesn't cover all the
Well,
costs
that's true.
to educate that student in Rockport. So they're also at a deficit.
They are. I think one of the major issues I have with school choice, though, is that school choice is a privileged decision that people who often choice the most people who can choice their children do so because they have the resources to get their kids to that district. That it is a dividing line economically for people who cannot afford to drive their kids off to Rockport or to Manchester or to Hamilton Wenham every day, that don't have the opportunity to do that. So you are taking away a chunk of people in the community who might otherwise be engaged in the school district itself and working to make it better and to improve it and to add their contributions. And they're effectively escaping out the back door because they have the resources to do so. If I can drive my kid off to a district, to Marblehead every day, and I have the ability to do that, that's great. But everybody in Gloucester doesn't have that same resource.
Right, so then
So
they
it's-
don't
there's an
opt,
inequity.
they don't choose that option.
Well, they
to
can't
school
choose that
choice
option.
because
It's
they-
not an option for them.
Right.
So it's
And there's no easy way to get from Gloucester to Rockport. Well, there's the bus. I mean, there's the CADA bus, but
But I think it disenfranchises people, and I think that's a
Right.
concern. And as a consequence, you bring those people out. You also then concentrate the other aspects of some of the issues. If you have lower income students, which is not a negative thing. People, I don't want my kids going to school with low income kids. I would heartily disagree with that.
well, most schools aren't all low income or all high income, right? There's always a
but
diverse mix.
There's less diversity in some school districts than there are others. But I think that's part of Gloucester's strength, is that it has that diversity of people in its school district, in its community.
Yeah, it clearly offers more, as we had mentioned, opportunity for AP classes, more AP classes, and other things, especially in the sciences and in the Gloucester schools.
Yeah.
Yeah, so continues to be an ongoing issue, no matter what decade you live in, I suppose. But here we are looking at some changes in Gloucester schools. Now, Peter,
Is this question about building the new elementary schools, is this something that people can still get involved in? Is there opportunity for people in the community to get involved in this?
Yes, definitely. It's going to be a very public process. It's sort of in the early stages right now. The feasibility study of where a new school could potentially be sited is just starting to take place, and there will be opportunities for people to, weigh in on that as we go. Then there will be a public vote as to whether the project moves forward.
what's the consequence of the public vote?
If the public votes no to the city putting money into this project,
New school.
into this new school, then it won't move forward, and
it
we
will-
won't get a new
So
school.
there'll
And
be
you'll
a
lose
vote.
the grant.
There'll be a
lose
vote
it.
on the ballot.
We have the
We'll go to-
opportunity
It'll be a
to
debt
have a majority
override,
of
I
our
believe that's what
school
it's called.
paid
We
for.
would have to vote on a debt override of,
Yes,
of Proposition 2.5.
Yeah,
But it would
Yeah,
provide 60% of the
close
cost
to
of a new
close to
building.
60% of the cost of the building. So if we don't get that money from the MSBA with a vote, yes, then the project
And
won't
more
happen.
consequential, we missed this window for a long period of time.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah,
Because
we're
the
out of
MSBA
running.
doesn't come around every year and say,
Right.
you didn't pass it last year, but do you want a school this year?
Right.
You may be 10, 20, 30 years down the road before you come around back into that cycle again.
This is
Right.
like a matching grant where we may
Right.
not have the opportunity.
Right.
Right now, the state is going to pay a lot of the money.
They are.
If we do it, the state will pitch in a lot of the money.
If
But
the
we-
community supports
if
the project.
It's
When,
not
when
like
would
that.
the vote be?
The closest it'll be is a year from now.
So on the ballot, November 2019.
Next November, potentially.
Oh,
yeah.
interesting.
It's
Something
not
to
like
watch.
Gloucester's ever missed an opportunity to have someone else pay for infrastructure improvements in this community.
You're being sarcastic.
I am being very sarcastic.
he's talking
yes.
about
I was
something-
talking about the combined sewer
combined
overflow
sewer
about
overflow that we're
years
paying for
ago.
now.
We're all paying for now that was overlooked decades ago when it could have been done much more cheaply. And
Which is
economically.
going back to the infrastructure, planning for infrastructure and making sure that things get.
It's all
And
about
hard,
investing in
right?
the community
Yeah.
you choose to live.
It's true.
And if you don't invest in the community you choose to live, why are you living there?
Right, right. And so, Peter, I kind of want to pivot over to the idea of this, what you're bringing to the table is the Gloucester Charter review, because it's looking at systems of how governments are run, especially in the city of Gloucester. And that could have implications, right? A long term of maybe even looking at infrastructure or planning.
Yeah, absolutely. That was the topic that I suggested we might talk about for a little bit this evening was the upcoming potential review of the Gloucester City Charter. There is a committee, Ruth Pino and Meredith Fine have been leading this committee that's looking into the possibility of having a charter review take place in Gloucester. The city charter hasn't been reviewed formally in at least over 30 years. And the mechanics of the city government, at first it doesn't sound like a very exciting topic, but it really matters because the city budget is, what, Jason? It's over $100 million.
Over 100 million.
It's over $100 million a year. So when you think about it, the city is responsible for a lot of things that affect our lives. And it seems to make sense periodically to take a look at how that city government is structured.
And the charter lays out how the city government works.
The charter spells out the mechanics of how our democracy works at the city level. And the mechanics of democracy, as we've seen in some of the recent elections, can have a significant effect on the outcome and how well that government functions. And so what this group is looking at is to bring a question to the voters in 2019 to create a committee of citizens. A citizens committee would be elected from the people of Gloucester, and that committee would get together and meet and study the city charter and study whether the way the government is currently structured works well to meet the needs of the city as we head into the 21st century. And that committee would come back possibly, this is a long process, in 2021 maybe would come back to the voters with a recommendation to make or not make changes to the structure of the city government. I mean, as a simple example, we re-elect our entire city government every 2 years. We could change that. We could have 4-year terms. We could have staggered terms so that we don't re-elect the entire school committee or the entire city council at the same time so that people stay so that we have continuity. These are questions that should be looked at from time to time. Gloucester has had different forms of government over the years, and maybe the current form of government serves us well, but we haven't looked at it in a while, so maybe some adjustments are called for.
And it's important to remember that
Jason,
this is a recommending body. This isn't
Right.
just a group of people who are going to decide for us what our government is going to look like. They will have a lot of public hearings and a lot of public input, a lot of discussion. They will come up with a list of recommendations that they feel is reflective of the conversation that they've had with the community. And then the people get to vote on that. So it's not even then, once those recommendations come forward, if the community says, not so much,
Right.
then things stay the way they are. And
Right.
that's
But
also
it's
an option.
important to start the public conversation.
Yeah, this was
about
always
this
important.
because
Yeah,
it hasn't been reviewed in the last
Yeah.
30 years.
Yeah.
So
This
why
was-
not?
there was
Even
a
if
story
you
about
love
this in the-
how
in-
things are going.
Yeah, there was a story about this in the Gloucester Times, and I went and attended an organizing meeting and heard, what people were talking about, heard some of the rationale, and I said, it makes sense. You should, certainly if it's been 30 years or more since we've really taken a hard look at how we structure our city government. When you look at the issues the one we were just talking about now, about the schools, is just one of a lot of issues that the city is facing. And how we organize as people to create this body that's going to, we hope, reflect our will and somehow take the thinking of the broad population of the city and implement that in some way to address these issues that we're facing, these challenges that we're facing, it's an important thing to do, to look and say, are the bodies that we're creating to carry out our will as residents of Gloucester really meeting our needs, really doing what we want them to do?
It'll be a fascinating process, I think, to watch how this gets started and to see where it goes and the community meetings that happen, and also something else we'll keep a watch on. We are going to have a show on Cape Ann Report on this very topic, but it's great to bring this up and start the conversation now. It's great.
You see it every 4 years. We look at the presidential election and we have a debate about the Electoral College, and we say, is that meeting our needs? Or
right.
not?
I mean, that's an institution.
And it's not. And it should be eliminated.
Just saying.
Throw that in there.
Not that, but if you think about it, the nice thing at the municipal level is people can get involved. You really can get your hands around this. There's plenty of opportunities, as with the school building decision. There are plenty of opportunities for residents of Gloucester to get involved and really have a say in how.
Well, in a lot of ways, it's the most
happens.
important piece because it affects our lives as residents. So whether you live in Gloucester, I mean, this is a Gloucester charter, but in every local municipality, because these are the laws that we have to go by. It's
our
how
Constitution.
Yeah,
and
it's infrastructure.
it's a
It's
living
infrastructure.
document that needs to be looked at every once in a while.
How we take care of our education, public health.
It's
all
really
these
the
important
most
questions.
important. Is that local element. We oftentimes think that these state elections are important. Of course they are. The national elections are important. But what happens here, where we live and work, and raise our children and live out our lives, it's just it's important.
I've always felt that if you look at the national landscape, you look at the state landscape, and you think, I can't make a difference. My vote doesn't matter. I can't get involved. I can't change anything. This is where you do it. You do it locally. And sometimes you go to a meeting and there's 10 people there, or there's 5 people there. But you can actually affect change locally if you attend these meetings and you show up. And that can change your entire community.
Yeah.
So it's really important to be involved that way.
And you have a lot of direct access to your local government here.
Yeah.
You see your city councilors in the grocery store. You see your school committee member at the gym with you, and you have a chance to talk to them. You have a chance to be involved. And the city government does a lot of things that affect our day-to-day life.
Totally. Yeah, it'll be interesting how this all works out. And we've talked about some new things that we'll be watching for the next year. Peter, Aria, and Jason, thank you for joining me on Cape Ann Report and sitting around the table for this great conversation. And hope to have you all back another time. For viewers, get involved in our conversation. Check us out on social media. I'm your host, Maureen Aylward. Until the next time on Cape Ann Report, take care.